Israel, and to all peoples through his Son, Yeshua the Messiah.
Teach me the way of your decrees, Yahweh, and I will follow them to the end.
Give me the understanding that I may keep your Torah and observe it with all my heart. Help me walk in the path of your commandments, for I delight in it. Turn my heart to your testimonies and not dishonest again. Turn my eyes away from business and vanity, but revive me in your ways.
Fulfill your word to your servant, which leads to reverence for you. Make the disgrace I dread pass away, for your judgments are good.
Behold, I long for your precepts. Revive me by your righteousness. Blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe, who has given us the Lord, Messiah Yeshua. Amen.
Amen. I apologize. Something going on with the throat here that kind of developed as I was singing, so sorry about that. All right, it is my honor this morning to invite a dear friend of our family up to tell you a little bit about himself and give a presentation this morning. I know it's young, from the land of Israel, Modi'in. Did I get Modi'in? All right, did okay on the pronunciation there. Modi'in of Maccabean fame, actually, I believe. So maybe he can tell you more about that as we'll see. But I'll let him give more of an introduction to himself, but honored and privileged to have him here to share with us this morning. Please welcome him. Thank you.
Well, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. First of all, who here hasn't yet been to Israel? Okay, by the way, and that's the way to frame it, not yet. So I want to apologize to you, as you might say, y'all. If you're having trouble with my thick Israeli accent, they're laughing at me already?
Already.
Okay, that's all right. We're getting this set up. Well, the good news and the bad news part. The first time I did this presentation in Franklin, North Carolina, just a few weeks ago, which by the way was covered with snow and ice, 22 degrees. I intentionally, for this trip,
Is this it?
yes.
Oh,
that's
got
just get rid of the stuff on the left.
Like that.
Perfect.
Like that.
Complex solution to every simple problem. So yeah, Franklin, North Carolina. I intentionally picked only southern states because knowing a little bit about weather in the United States, and you'll hear a little more about this later, but I actually grew up a little north of here, a place called the Bronx in New York City. A couple of shout-outs. Yo, now you just can't leave. Yeah, I know that's what you were waiting for. This presentation, first time I did it in Franklin, took an hour and 45 minutes. And even though I'm half Israeli, half a New Yorker, and I can speak fast, this is going to be much shorter. We're going to take all of the questions and discussion, and we're going to have that with the food. I'm a people pleaser. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. Now, by the way, Marcus has a link to the very last presentation that I did here in the U.S., and that was in July and August. Things are happening so fast that each time I come, it's a different presentation, but you can almost go back and watch that and, kind of fill you in a little bit. Things are literally fast and furious. So we're going to jump right in. So on the left is a very odd design. And that's the way some of the Israelis who live in what we call Otef Aza, the Gaza envelope, near the Gaza Strip, felt. That flag on the right is a bogus flag of a country that has never existed in the history of the world, called Palestine. It's never been in Palestine. We'll talk a little more about that as we go along, but people basically thought, we'd all be getting together and singing Kumbaya and everything would be fine. Without realizing that this is not an issue of land, this is an issue of Islam and jihad, which sadly in America y'all are going to be learning about really soon. Although, with what's been going on, and okay, I'll put it this way, having grown up in the U.S., although you can actually make the argument I did not grow up in America. Growing up in New York City is not really America. And it's been 11 years since I've had the privilege of coming and speaking in the state of Tennessee. And that was in Johnson City, which I now find out is as close to where we are now as from where I live in Modi'in to Damascus, Syria. America's a big country. Okay, so do you know what? Let's just hop right in. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a quick reminder, the Gaza Strip, we were invaded by 6,000 terrorists, sea, air, and land. My government made horrific mistakes. We were totally unprepared. I know you all have grown up thinking the Israel Defense Forces, we are just, and the Mossad, we're just the best of the best. Except when we get too arrogant and stupid and don't see what's literally in front of us. When you begin to believe what you want to believe. Oh, Hamas is deterred. No, they're not. Next slide, please. On the left, a map. Now, this is not my favorite map for a lot of reasons. First of all, it refers to something called the occupied territories. There are no occupied territories. The land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel. By the way, that's the definition of Zionism. You hear it, Zionism, oh, Zionism is bad. You hear that on American college campuses all over the place. Zionism is racism. Really? The land of Israel belongs to the people of Israel is a concept from the Torah. This is from Hashem. This is from God. If you don't like it, blame it on him. It's his idea. All right, this isn't the kind of group that's going to blame God, are they? No. By the way, I was very impressed, where I'm staying, there's the church that kind of put the Eiffel Tower in front of it.
And the rocket ship.
Yeah,
The rocket ship, we call it rocket ship.
Okay, yeah, it's thinking, okay, interesting customs. Okay, they mislabeled Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel. By the way, if you exclude Jerusalem, 95% of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, occurs in Judea and Samaria, which the American government, well, not anymore, but former Secretary of State Blinken, it's like an Purim, yeah, he would call it the West Bank. By the way, the Bowmans lived in America's West Bank. The Pacific Northwest, California, that's the West Bank. We don't have a West Bank. Okay, where I live, by the way, if you see that big red line, it shows you how narrow Israel is. The big red line finishes right in the city of Modi'in, where I live. I made Aliyah, moved to Israel, September 8th, 2009, and I've lived in the city of Modi'in. So many anecdotes I can tell you. Modi'in is only Israel's 18th largest city. We barely have about 103,000 people. However, we lead the country in per capita enlistment in the IDF. We also lead the country in the overall number of divorces.
Wow.
That's because we're a young city, only 25 years old. A lot of young marrieds moved there and wound up being young singles, or not so young singles anymore. And sadly, we lead the country in overall numbers of killed in action in this war so far. We've lost 46 residents of our city. Okay, let's keep going. Next slide, please. Okay, there's a map of the Middle East you've probably never seen. That's something called the Sykes-Picot Agreement from the First World War. Mark Sykes of the British, Francois Picot of the French get together and they say, after this war is over, the First World War, this is the way they're going to carve up the Middle East. Now you'll notice something. There's no country called Lebanon, there's no country called Jordan, there's no country called Syria, there's no country called Iraq. Those were all made in the 20th century. So when people look at Syria now and say, wow, Syria seems to be splitting apart, that can't happen. As we say in Hebrew, ¿por qué no? Why not? You guys study Hebrew? That's fabulous. You said it was a Messianic congregation. So yeah, okay. That's fabulous, I love it. Next slide, please. Okay. This presentation, which I began working on as soon as I got back home in August, I've had to change 4 times. there has been a major event. In September, we finally took the war back to Hezbollah, who had been, in America, it's generally not known. Well, we were invaded by Hamas on October 7th. On October 8th, in the north, we began getting missiles and rockets fired at us for no reason, other than the fact of it was the opportunity to kill some Jews, and they seized it. Now, an amazing thing happened in December. Assad, the dictator of Syria, abdicated and took off for Moscow. We immediately went in and took, there was that little blue section between the yellow, and by the way, Syria is a massive country. That was the area patrolled by United Nations troops. United Nations, probably best known as unwanted nobodies, did absolutely nothing to fulfill their mandate, either there or in southern Lebanon, based on UN Security Council resolutions. There seems to be the UN for the world and the UN for us in Israel. Two totally different entities. Next slide, please. See how fast we're moving? We'll be eating lunch in 20 minutes. Not a chance. By the way, after being in America since the 13th of January, this is the time in my speaking tour where I tend to look at maps like that, and I feel like E.T. And I just go, home. So yeah, America's a great place to visit. We don't have Krispy Kreme in Israel. You know when you go and you buy some Arizona iced tea in the store and there's big cans for $1 or 99 cents? We get to pay 18 or 19 shekels for that, which is about $5. Again, we go back to no bueno. Not good. Not good. Next slide, please. Okay, so Syria falls. Israel immediately goes and takes out Syria's offensive weaponry. Syria had the most intense array of anti-aircraft missiles. The Soviets, no more Soviets. The Russians, same difference. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. That's important when we need to strike Iran, and we will need to strike Iran. And it enables us to now fly over Syria. Iraq doesn't have air defenses, and be able to strike Iran. Whether we'll do it or not, we're having a crisis in Israel of leadership. Our political and military leadership needs to change. Anyway, so just one quick little thing. I've been coming back to the US, speaking to groups that generally define themselves as either Messianic or Hebrew roots. And by the way, the thing that's interesting about it is every single Messianic congregation I've ever spoken in defines what Messianic congregation means a little differently. So I was in one congregation, and the guy said, I don't understand, why doesn't Israel simply, instead of going around like that, why don't they just go across? And I had to break the news to him that the earth was actually a sphere. It's round. Flat earth in some places is an issue. By the way, I think it's all a riot. And my experience in many congregations is I think the pastors and the leadership of Messianic congregations gets together every year and they try to decide what issue they can pick this coming year that will be the most divisive. So first we've got the divine name and the pronunciation here. And by the way, as a Hebrew speaker, I find it a riot that the divine name, which is 4 Hebrew letters, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, in America is pronounced with 6 syllables. Yahweh. That's a whole other talk. Next slide, please. Let's keep going. Okay, so we're living in a world that at the time that we're living in now, the truth no longer really matters. It's more of an issue of whatever narrative is spoken. And once the narrative is spoken, everyone gets their news seemingly from TikTok. And it's a 10-second bite, and they then spew that narrative to the entire world. Here's a perfect example. The Telegraph, a British publication, proves that the numbers of casualties in Gaza are inflated. Who cares? Next slide. So Hamas is like that. Who died? How they died? How many died? But no one cares, because you can label whatever term you want, and you don't have to prove it. You can call someone racist, you can say Israel's apartheid, you can say we're committing a genocide, and not have to prove it. You know, when Assad left Syria, they found a mass grave. 100,000 men, women, and children, their bodies. No one cares. Why? Because I'll give you another cliche. No Jews, no news. There wasn't a single Jew involved in it. Russia invades Ukraine, I think it's 3 years ago. Who talks about it? How many people were killed? Sudan has had a civil war, 500,000 killed. Crazy. Next slide. Okay, so we took positions on the Syrian side of Mount Hermon, the largest mountain range in northern Israel, that overlooks not only Israel and Syria, but Lebanon as well. But there are people who are saying, well, wait a second. So this is, Israel is now fulfilling the biblical promise, the promise of God, to expand the borders, greater Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates. No, that's not what's happening. And you have to separate your theological construct from the reality. This is strictly based on security. Next slide, please. There's the map. Map reading has become an art or a skill from a long time ago. I studied U.S. geography in second grade. Trust me, it was about 150 years ago. People can't imagine the Middle East. And you know, one of the assignments tonight, after the bingo, is to pull up a map of the Middle East. Ask Rabbi Google, map of the Middle East, and you'll see how large it is. We're getting ballistic missiles. And I gotta tell you, there's nothing like being woken up at 3:30 in the morning with sirens because of incoming rockets from Iran. In this case, it was from the Houthis in Yemen. Yemen is all the way at the bottom of Saudi Arabia, which is much further from Israel than even Israel to Iran. It's a real challenge. It's really amazing. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're told that Israel is racist inherently because it's a Jewish ethno-state. Okay? The idea that, by the way, Israel is not exclusively Jewish. We're 73% Jewish. We've got about 10.5 million people in our country. We're the size of the state of New Jersey. And we're not talking about a big deal. We have 22% Muslims. We have 5% Christians. By the way, not like Christians in America. Believe it or not, we don't have Protestants. And this is something that happened way before the state of Israel. We have ancient Christianity. So we have Greek Orthodox, we have Armenian Orthodox, we have Greek Catholic. We have what we call Latin Catholic. We've got everything. Protestants, the first Protestant church was in the middle of the 19th century. Christ Church in Jerusalem. Okay, so a single Jewish state is an offense to the world. But in the Middle East, there are 22 Arab Muslim states. No one says a word about that. To me, it's bizarre. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's a repetition. The first one, end the unjust Jewish occupation of Arab land. There's little tiny Israel. The name Israel can't even fit on a map. But we're the ones. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now we get into some really key issues. I'm a licensed Israeli tour guide, so I've studied a lot. And I have to look, so 200 years of archaeological excavations have never uncovered a single artifact from something called the ancient Palestinian people. There has never, in the history of the world, been a country by the name of Palestine, an independent country. Hasn't existed. The term, okay, most of you are a little young for this, came in vogue in 1964. Yasser Arafat, an Egyptian, in the employ of the Soviet KGB, came up with a brilliant idea. He took the Jordanian flag, pulled the star off, and all of a sudden, boom, 3,000 years of Palestinian history were created. It's never been. It's astounding. Now, here's the other thing that's, okay, let's go to the next slide. Palestine is an Islamist colonialist project, using terminology that's, in vogue on college and university campuses these days. Yeah, everyone's said, colonial, and the terminology in America has changed radically. And President Trump and his administration are doing everything to roll that back. My favorite group that was popular within the last year on university and college campuses across the country were Gays for Palestine, which the equivalent would actually be chickens for KFC. It's so astounding, and you have some spokesperson there who says, well, we're out here supporting the gay community in Palestine and Gaza, without realizing that any time an openly gay person shows up in a Muslim country, they're killed. But again, and here's an expression that was popular when I was a teenager, don't confuse the issue with facts. That's exactly what's going on in the world today. People have their narratives, and then there are facts. Ignore the facts, let's just spew whatever, because it's amazing. You've seen photos. Yeah, this is, I was hoping for a biblical environment. The story of Noah is not the one that I wanted to conjure up. Okay, so here, we've got, I distracted myself, I apologize. Do you know what? Let's keep going, I'll come back to, okay, so narratives. So Israel is blamed for a genocide, but when you see the pictures of our hostages being released, all of a sudden, the members of Hamas put on military uniforms, they all look incredibly healthy. Somehow, in Gaza, which is allegedly all destroyed, they were able to get these big banners and posters and all kinds of things. Again, how is that even possible? Next slide, please. Israel is the indigenous name of the Holy Land. Palestine's name given to it by colonizers. You open up your Bible, it's Israel. Now here's the thing that's interesting. Let's do a little bit with chronology. Give you a frame of reference you're familiar with. Okay, so Yeshua was killed by the Romans approximately in the year 30. 40 years later, the temple is destroyed in the year 70 by the Romans. In the year 622, we're talking about 550 years later, Muhammad creates Islam. The Quran is written subsequent to that. 43 times in the Quran, Israel is mentioned. 9 times, Jews are mentioned. If there was something called a Palestine or Palestinian people, why would the Quran not have ever mentioned it? But again, don't confuse the issue with facts. Next slide, please. Palestine is a term invented by a white European colonialist. That's a statue of the Emperor Hadrian. Next slide, please. Now the difference. We're the indigenous people. The term Jews come from the fact that we're from Judea. Arabs come from Arabia. They came from Saudi Arabia. Next slide, please. Okay, here's a little bit of humor. The moment you realize the origin, okay. The term Palestinian, the Emperor Hadrian, is the one that renamed Judea to Palestina, named after the Philistines, the arch enemies. Plishtim, Philistine, in Hebrew, means invader. Kind of an inside joke. Next slide, please. So if Jews aren't indigenous to Israel, where exactly do people think we're from? And where were we living when we built our temple in Jerusalem 3,000 years ago? The book of John talks about Yeshua going to the temple for the Feast of Dedication. For those of you who are still struggling with Hebrew, dedication, that's Chanukah. Chanukah, same root as my name, it means dedication. Next slide, please. Quick note about the UN, and we could do a whole presentation on them, but why bother? Since the year 2003, here's a listing of UN resolutions. So they've done 40 on Syria because Assad was using poison gas to kill his people. 28 on North Korea, 22 on Sudan, 21 on Iran, 4 on Cuba. Israel, 404 resolutions. It's starting not to seem a little fair. Next slide, please. So there are 4 things in the world that don't exist. Just a reminder. We've got Bigfoot, fairies, unicorns, and something called Palestine. Which, by the way, of all the outrageous things that President Trump has been saying and doing, and by the way, I heard a commentator on the news. I was with friends in Florida, where it was 83 degrees, by the way. Commentator said, I wonder if President Trump will have to step down after a year. He'll have already accomplished everything. Amazing. I mean, literally, if you miss the news cycle for one day, you're missing something like really, really huge. By the way, later we can talk about the Trump plan for Gaza because it's not exactly reality-based. But there are times that he says and does things to shake things up, and boy, does he shook things up. Next slide, please. Okay, so for those of us who study history, we're familiar with the Arch of Titus. The Arch of Titus in Rome, with depictions of Judean slaves being forced by the Romans to carry the treasures of the temple out into exile. But somehow we weren't in Israel until 1948. Next slide, please. Okay, the dates are a little off because this is a few years old. So the Dome of the Rock, which was built in the years 691, 692, sits on the Temple Mount. But somehow they're there first. I scratched the back of my head. I started pulling my hair out. You see the results. I don't get it. Next slide, please. Okay, calling Jesus, I'm going to, next week I'll be in Virginia. This slide is with my friends there. Calling Jesus Palestinian is like calling Pocahontas Virginian. This is a big issue. There's something called Christian Palestinianism that is rewriting history and saying that Yeshua, Jesus, was actually, he's been described as a Palestinian martyr, a shaheed. A shaheed in Islam, they're the guys that strap on explosives, go into a pizza shop, and blow it up. And what's amazing is, when I turn to the Messianic Hebrew roots movements, let alone the mainstream Christian denominations, all 43,000 worldwide, crickets. No one even says, hey, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Next slide, please. So speaking of ridiculous, right before Christmas in the Vatican, there is an exhibit put up, a nativity scene from Bethlehem, showing Yeshua, Jesus, in a keffiyeh. The keffiyeh is the Arab headdress, popularized by Yasser Arafat, symbolizing jihadist terrorism. It sat there for 4 days before the Pope. No clue why. They had it removed. But it's astounding. You can literally rewrite history now. Through our iPhones, we have access to more information. The generation of today can immediately access all kinds of facts. When I was a kid, we had to trudge over to the public library, and we had to face the dreaded card catalog. And you'd open it up, and you'd thumb through, and then you'd find a book. Now, you had no idea if this book was in the library or not. And you'd go over to the librarian, who generally needed a personality transplant, and you'd say as sweetly as you could you please check and see if this book is in there? Next slide, please. Okay, so I posted this on Facebook, and by the way, not pointing to anyone in particular, Asher, but anyone else,
Not all of you, not all.
if we're not friends on Facebook, that hurt my feelings. So I posted this. Millions of people are, this is right before Christmas. And I even put a note, again, understanding to whom I usually speak, saying, this point, billions of people around the globe are about to celebrate the birthday of a Jewish man born in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago, but don't think Jews lived there before 1948. I said, even though it's very likely that Yeshua was actually born during Sukkot, the point of this is still the same. But again, we're trying to confuse the issue with facts. By the way, for future speakers, y'all probably need a big clock there. Preferably one digitally that counts down. Because I'm a tour guide, I'll speak for the next 3 hours, and I won't do it. Chava, bless your heart. By the way, it's so much fun having traveled through the South. Growing up, well, I'll get to it, okay, because this is a different presentation. I'm buzzing through this because people say to me, we need you to personalize your talks more. We need to understand more about you and where you're coming from, so when you tell us about the Temple Mount, or when you tell us to be activists for Israel, because to me it's astounding, I've encountered Messianic congregations that tell me of the validity of the Torah to this very day, but somehow the Torah they study has nothing to do with the state of Israel, land of Israel, or the Jewish people. We don't get along very well. Okay, next slide, please. You've heard about the Houthis. I thought I'd throw in something here. They have these banners, instead of flags. So it says, Allahu Akbar, God is the greatest. And by the way, if you're ever like in a Walmart or a Costco, and you hear someone yell out, Allahu Akbar, yeah, not good. Something good is not about to happen. Death to America. Remember, in their eyes, y'all are the big Satan. We're just a little Satan. Death to Israel. Curse upon the Jews, victory to Islam. This is what they're about. Now, in my last slide, I spoke a lot about, because they're chanting to globalize the Intifada. The Intifada is when they were blowing up buses in Israel every day. And people say, wow, you think that would happen here in America? What do you think happened in New Orleans 2 months ago? And years before in Fort Hood? Let alone when America didn't have a southern border. Now all of a sudden you do, by the way. In the Republic of Texas, they were very happy about that. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead now. We're going to get into more personal stuff. So, the war breaks out in Israel. My government, like most governments in the world, is woefully inefficient. And I see a page come up on Facebook. And it says Sword of Iron. By the way, in Israel, we refer to the current war as Chovot Barzel, which is swords of iron, swords plural. To the jihadists, by the way, they call this the El-Aqsa flood. They refer to the entire Temple Mount as El-Aqsa. And by the way, that's why the Temple Mount is the key issue. We'll be getting there in just a few minutes. So all of a sudden, I see this page on Facebook. Someone is organizing volunteers from all over the world to come to Israel. And it's like, hey, where in Tel Aviv can I stay? I want to volunteer for 2 weeks doing agriculture work. And they're coordinating it. And I see the person who's running it is a woman by the name of Yocheved Kim Ruttenberg. And it's now got 43,000 people on it. And people writing in all the time, thank you so much. I had this experience, and this is where I met this group, and they picked up volunteers, and we did that. And I'm thinking, this is a high-powered executive of a non-governmental organization, a not-for-profit. And years ago in America, I worked in not-for-profits. I'm thinking, how is it that I never heard of this woman? Now understand something. If you love and care for Israel, there's no such thing as being too old. No such thing as being too young. No such thing as being, I don't have money. There's always something you can do. We'll get to that near the end. So I was finally at a special small guided trip to the Gaza area, not inside Gaza, but the Gaza envelope on our side. And the guy that I was with said, and he was a survivor of the Nova dance party massacre. And he said, oh, there's Yocheved, let me introduce you. So I'm thinking, this is like, from when I worked in America, this is gonna be a woman in a, like in a business suit, this is a high-powered executive. Next slide, please. She's a kid. She just turned 24. She came to Israel before her 23rd birthday and stayed. Just organizing and coordinating volunteers, no salary, no organization behind her. She created it on Facebook. Okay, so when people say, Hanoch, you're involved in activism on the Temple Mount, where does that come from? So, next slide, please. So there's me at 16. Yeah, that hair was like, now I don't even have enough hair for one single Jedi braid. Not one. Okay, 16 years old, I'm a senior in high school. I skipped 8th grade. Used to be very smart. But, and you see, what's great about the picture is you see the clothing style of the era. The jacket is one pattern, the tie is another pattern, the shirt is a whole different pattern. I had absolutely no drive to do anything in life. I was graduating high school. I couldn't care less about anything. I grew up in an Irish Catholic neighborhood where I was hated for being the local Christ killer. We were, okay, I want to say it in a way that in Mississippi they corrected me. I was in Meridian, Mississippi a few weeks ago. And I said, I grew up poor. They said, no, you was Poe. He said, excuse me? No, you was Poe. So I said, okay, so we was Poe. My first memories, oh, and by the way, in case there's someone who wants to ask the question, I'll blow it out now. Because I mentioned this in a previous presentation, guy in the back raised his hand and said, but you're Jewish. Here's another stereotype, boom, just blown away right now. I remember my mother shushing me as a young boy because there was a knock at the door and it was a creditor, which I didn't even know what that meant. Our rug in the living room was threadbare, it had holes, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. Why? I could take my soldiers, put them in this hole, reach through and pull them out here. Without realizing it, I actually invented tunnel warfare. Don't tell anyone in Israel. But as a kid, you don't realize this. But what I did realize is that everyone in the neighborhood hated me. I didn't have friends, and there were no girls that would go out with me. It's like, ooh, a Jew. So, I didn't have a normal childhood. This is the 70s, remember. And you're looking at someone who's never been drunk, never gotten high, and never even smoked a cigarette. By the way, when I've given this presentation in Baptist churches, I usually get the big thumbs up from the pastor. I didn't realize, Baptists have a different way of living than we'd experience. But you don't get high on your own. You don't get drunk on your own. Okay, so the picture next to it with even more hair is my passport photo. Because I had two teachers. I went to an all-boy high school. Dewood Clinton High School in the Bronx. 7,200 guys. By the way, in case, every once in a while people know me say, you seem a little awkward around women, Hanoch. No, that's where it comes from. All-boy high school. 7,200 guys on triple session. But I had a husband and wife teacher who were involved with the Youth Towards Israel, and they arranged for myself and two of my classmates, who were also Jewish, to be able to go to Israel that summer when we graduated, right before I turned 17, and it only cost $295. 7 weeks in Israel, including airfare, which was great because I don't think my parents could have afforded $395. So I go to Israel. And by the way, the picture, don't change it yet. You see, there was a movie that was popular called Shaft. You may not be familiar with it, but that was the clothing style, and you can see the beautiful neighborhood that I grew up in. It should be flattened. Unfortunately, it's not. So I go to Israel 7 weeks, I come back, and again, I'm starting college in another 3 weeks, right after Labor Day weekend. And I'm going to a branch of the City University of New York, which I only went to because it was a 10-minute walk from where I lived. I had no ambitions, no drive. I did not grow up religiously observant. I didn't know about Shabbat, I didn't know about kosher food, none of it. But I was hated for being a Jew. It's interesting. It's interesting. So I get off the plane. First thing my father asks me at Kennedy Airport, so you want to live in Israel? And my response was, no. I was 7, I just turned 17. I wanted a girlfriend. I wanted something that would hold my hand walking down the street as we went bought ice cream together. I mean, life was really simple. And then the Yom Kippur War broke out, October 1973, which was our worst intelligence disaster until this October 7th, almost exactly 50 years, minus 1 day. And all I could picture was all the young soldiers that I had met fighting and dying. I was out of my mind. Out of our population of 3.5 million at the time, now we're 10.5 million, 3.5 million, we lost about 2,800 killed in action. Let me give you a comparison as Americans so you can understand that. In largely 10 years of fighting, America lost over 57,000 men and women in Vietnam. Based on the American population at that time, if you switched it over to Israel, it would have been like America losing 250,000 men, not in 10 years, but in 3 weeks. Our country was staggered. Now, again, remember, this is the 70s, where in America, every ethnic, racial, and religious group had its activist militant faction. So I threw myself into the 2 main organizations doing crazy stuff, and the next one is. And that's my very first arrest at age 18. Don't worry, it was a nonviolent protest. 31 of us chained ourselves to the gates of the UN, splattered animal blood, burned effigies of Arafat, who was speaking at the UN. My hair's a little shorter, but there's still so much of it. And it was so brown. The guy next to me that's handcuffed with me, by the way, so that's amazing. We're handcuffed to the gates of the UN. They clipped the handcuffs off to put other handcuffs on us. I was like, I had bracelets all over the place. It was unbelievable. The guy next to me, Steve, he comes into the story a little bit later. But my 8-point average in college dropped down to 2.11. Again, I had skipped 8th grade. I had no time for school. There was a demonstration. There were Jews to be saved. There were things to do. Next slide, please. Now, so who did I idolize? Yair Stern, who led the most militant underground Jewish group before our statehood, fighting both the British and the Arabs. And look what he says. We're all been drafted for life. This is my commitment was absolutely total. So by the way, when I come across people who tell me how much they love Israel, how much they care for Israel, and not being as polite as y'all are here in the South, I say, so what are you doing? So, well, I pray. Well, that's just lovely. We all pray. By the way, that's a huge difference. I'm going to quote, does anyone know who Tommy Waller is? He's the visionary that created Hayovel. These amazing volunteers in Sharon and Samaria. Tommy was addressing a group that I was guiding. And he said to them, he looked at him, and he said, as Christians, he said, or Messianics, we pray and then step back and look up. We're waiting for God to do something. He points out the window, And it says, but the Jews out here, they pray and they pick up a shovel. There's got to be an action involved. So I am crazed. And by the way, just a thing, you know, I'm a parent. Actually now, wow, I'm a grandparent. Still haven't gotten used to that idea. How did that even happen? Oh yeah, okay. You know that. So it's amazing, but I always let my mother know when I was going to get arrested. When I knew, I mean, sometimes, you know, things are spontaneous and stuff happens. But when I knew in advance, I told her. Now I look back on it and I said, what horror and fear must I have injected into her heart? Her little boy. Next slide, please. Okay, so here, I'm now 19 years old. That's a fake sheepskin coat. Don't be impressed with it. I don't know if you recognize the scenery behind me. That's Red Square in Moscow. 7 of us went to stage a sit-in to try to free a Soviet Jewish dissident who was serving out a prison sentence of 7 years in Siberia. And we figured the 7 of us could offer ourselves in exchange to serve out his prison sentence. Again, remember, 19 years old. You're young and immortal. Nothing can possibly happen to you. Now, 5 of them live in Israel. And every once in a while we bump into each other. And we talk about this. And we say, what if they would have said yes? You know? But you're a kid. Now, that's 6 months later in Israel. Obviously, you can tell from the attire. I was influenced by Che Guevara at the time. Looks like I'm in the Bolivian highlands. But that is a locked and loaded Uzi, which as a non-citizen I was not supposed to have. But you probably got a sense already of how well I follow the rules. The thing that's amazing is shortly afterwards, the activist movement basically collapsed. It was the 80s. I don't know if it was disco or what, but the world changed. Also, what changed for us, crazy Jews, was that guy Steve and 2 other people that I know were sentenced to federal prison. It seemed pipe bombs were going off, 4 bullets were shot through the door of the Soviet residence. By the way, there was a great chant for the next day. 1, 2, 3, 4 more bullets through your door. 5, 6, 7, 8, let my people immigrate. We thought we were clever. That was in the years before Saturday Night Live. So, you know, we came up with stuff. Next slide, please. Okay, so in looking for something, what is the single, I'm way too old to volunteer for the IDF. And I have to tell you in all honesty, there is a degree of survivor's guilt. When I've gone to the funerals and memorials and the processions bringing the bodies of our fallen soldiers back into Modi'in to be buried in our city cemetery, I am humbled by the sacrifices of our young people. In fact, a quick story. My eldest daughter is in the first serious relationship since her divorce 7 years ago. So I went to Tel Aviv to have dinner with her and Yossi, who, by the way, at 39 years old, is a combat medic in a frontline unit of the Golani Brigade. So he's been in Gaza, he's been in Lebanon. And in coming back, I took the train from Tel Aviv to Modi'in, and I kind of had a heavy feeling in my heart as the train pulled into Modi'in, because within our train station is a giant wall mural of the photographs of all of our hostages. The men, women, and children who have been brutalized and raped, and horrific things have happened. And many of them, we still don't have home, and I don't know if we're going to get them. And then there's a table which has memorial candles burning, and the pictures of the latest of our soldiers from our city that have fallen. So I'm already feeling really heavy. So as the train is pulling in, I go towards the door. It's kind of like a New York City habit, like where the door's gonna open, closest to the escalator, so I don't have to walk stairs. And I notice the woman in front of me kind of looks over that way, and I look over to see what she's looking at. So I'm a nosy buddy. And I see a young woman stand up, and I notice she's moving kind of awkwardly. And I'm looking, and she must be like 19, maybe 20 years old. And I see she only has one leg. She has a metal prosthetic leg. And it must be new because she's kind of moving awkwardly on her Canadian crutches. And I really wanted to go over to her and say something. What are you going to say? Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your service. It's amazing. So what I've done is I've gotten involved with groups to reclaim the Temple Mount. Now understand something. For those of you who've been to Israel and gone to the Temple Mount, you've been told, we in Israel, sometimes I think we're too stupid to live. In June 1967, we liberate and reunite Jerusalem, the eternal capital of our people. Eternal capital of the people of Israel. Jerusalem's never been the capital of anywhere else. Our Minister of Defense, Moshe Dayan, famous guy with the eye patch, who, by the way, now we find out was a sexual predator and an antiquities thief and not a good guy. But we didn't know this. 1967. Remember, Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet. We didn't have access to this information. We didn't know. He allowed the Jordanian Waqf, the Islamic Council, to be in control of the Temple Mount. The Israeli police would be around with very limited hours for non-Muslims, us Jews, y'all, other Christians. But the Muslims got free run of the place. This is our single holiest site on earth. When Muslims on the Temple Mount pray, they kneel with their behinds to the Dome of the Rock. They're praying towards Mecca in Saudi Arabia. In fact, up until the 1920s, the Waqf, the Islamic Council, in their brochures of the people visiting the Temple Mount, promoted it by saying, this is the site of Solomon's Temple. By the way, that's 3,000 years ago. Now they've taken that out. So now it's all, so the fight has been prayer rights on the Temple Mount. Because the Muslims say that this war is called the El Aqsa Flood, which they promise more and more, because they don't like us Jews up on what they call El Aqsa. Well, I've never really been intimidated by much of a challenge. So next slide, please. So, from my house, we call the house of prayer for all nations in Isaiah, and we've seen these wonderful graphics of the temple, and, we're all like, and people say, the expression is bimheina v'yameinu, speedily in our days. But I'm not the guy to sit back and say, yeah, it'd be great if that happened. I want to do it. Next slide, please. So here's a rendition of the Second Temple in modern Jerusalem. Man, this stuff gives me goosebumps. Next slide, please. Okay, that's the back of a friend of mine, Dr. Melissa Jane Kronfeld. She started an organization called High on the Har. Har, by the way, means mountain. The Temple Mount in Hebrew is Har Habayit, the mountain of the house. And that's what the shirt says, Bimheina v'yameinu. And by the way, on the Temple Mount, that makes the Muslims crazy. They really, really get agitated. I'd say bless their hearts, but I don't even mean it in a negative context. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first thing we began doing in the last year is we created these patches. There's the green one, there's the black one, and you see how close I am to the Dome of the Rock. Used to be, you could not go up with any religious symbol. Your tzitzit couldn't be out. Mine are in my pants. Anyway, you couldn't bring up a prayer book. You couldn't bring up a Bible. You couldn't even stand there and look like you were praying. We've been pushing the edge of the envelope for almost a year and a half now. So we created those patches, and for every one that was sold, it was $18, we gave 5 to soldiers. So there's a reservist. Who has that? Next slide, please. Now, the Waqf, the Islamic guards there, have these vests. And on the back, it has a really attractive emblem design that says Guardian of Al-Aqsa Mosque. By the way, evidently they didn't know a native English speaker. It should say Guardians of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But again, I grew up in the Bronx, so I'm not a native English speaker. We spoke something similar to English, not quite. So, what did we do? Next slide, please. That's the back of my newest shirt that I got just before I came to America in January. It says Guardians of the Beit HaMikdash, which is Guardians of the Temple. I cannot wait to wear that. I will be back on the Temple Mount 2 weeks from tomorrow. With Hashem's help, with God's help. Next slide, please. But what we began doing in August is being able, and in the Torah we're commanded to fully prostrate ourselves, but only on the Temple Mount. Only on the Temple Mount. We can't do that. You can't go to any synagogue in Nashville or Memphis and see Jews doing that. It's only there. This was the first time that we've been able to do this since the year 70. That's 1,955 years ago. Now, part of the thing that I struggle with is, how can I do that? I'm this poor kid who had no goals in life in the Bronx other than finally having a girl say yes to go out with me. How is it that I get to be involved in something that literally is changing the facts on the ground, changing history as we know it? Next slide, please. So this is now common on the Temple Mount. Come let us bow down and worship. Let us kneel before Hashem, God, who made us. This is... Next slide, please. That's me the very first time I did that, last August when I returned home. What's really bizarre is the wall behind is the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. They're 500 years old. They were built between 1532 and 1538 when the Ottoman Turks occupied our country. And they have slits in it so you could fire a crossbow. This is the 16th century. But when my friend took the picture, that ray of sunlight was coming through, which is like, I don't know, it looks kind of cool. I have to tell you in all honesty, I didn't feel the stones. I didn't feel the dust. It was like I was floating on a cloud. And I wonder about everyone that I'm descended from who for almost 2,000 years hasn't been able to do that. We do the full, what's it called in English? Aaronic blessing. The blessing of the Kohanim. You know, with the fingers. You know, like, I'm probably the only one here who's not really Jewish. Yeah, just about everywhere I go, people can, you know, yeah, they do them, yeah. I couldn't do that if you were holding my fingers. So yeah, thank you. Just rub it in. Just rub it in. Whatever happened to the concept of Southern hospitality? Y'all are out of control. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to be finished soon. We'll have time to lots of discussion. Next slide, please. So we even have young children, and we have these shirts. Now, I know some of you have been learning Hebrew. And one of the most difficult things for people learning Hebrew is when they go to Israel and they see, because we write in script. I can't even write block Hebrew letters. So people say, well, wait a second. But that's not Hebrew, is it? No, it's not. It's Arabic. And it says speedily in our days in Arabic. That's my other new shirt. If the first one didn't upset them enough, this will make them have a stroke. If nothing else, I would like you to leave today and remember this about me. I'm all about being subtle. Next slide, please. I didn't take that picture, but this little girl cut right to my heart. And one of the things that's most exciting for me to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me, is to see how many children are in this congregation. And I've spoken in many Messianic Hebrew congregations where I've looked around, and I'm one of the younger people there. That's not good. Not good at all. If you can't bring this life and lifestyle and understanding to the next generation, y'all won't even be a footnote to the next generation. It'll be like, yeah, my parents didn't go to regular church, like the big one out there. That's a big church. You guys have a lot of big churches here. This is the buckle of the Bible Belt. By the way, every place I've been in the South tells me they're the buckle of the Bible Belt. Y'all have the biggest buckles I've ever seen. Clanton, Alabama, Goshen, Mississippi. And by the way, the first time I spoke in Tennessee, I was early in my speaking career, and the guy that was driving me to the airport said to me, so where are you going next? I said, Alabama. He said, oh, you know, in Alabama, they invented the toothbrush. I said, really? He said, yeah. Because if it was anywhere else, it'd be the teeth brush. Like, oh, okay. So I'm leaving Alabama. Where are you going next? I'm going to Georgia. You know, in Georgia, they invented the toothbrush. And sucker twice. I said, really? Yeah, because of it. And then I found every place I went to in the South said it about the next state. And then you get down to Mississippi and Louisiana. Whoa, okay. We've got to get serious. So, wow, that was quick. So, it's great to yearn for the rebuilding of the temple, because that's the one thing that will change the dynamic of the world. Because the temple was to be a house of prayer for all nations. And that's why we're trying to change history. Now, it is difficult to prostrate, because the way many of my co-religionists do is they fall to both knees and then they stretch out. Understand something. I have a cracked left patella and a torn right medial meniscus. If I drop to both knees on stone, I ain't never getting up. So it's a challenge. Next slide, please. And I will place my sanctuary in their midst forever. We read this stuff all the time. How lucky am I to be involved in part of that? Okay, let's go to the very last slide, and then we'll come back. Next one. Okay, so there's a way to contact me, because I'd love for you all to stay in touch. My website, www.kolyehuda, KOLYEHUDA.com. Now, there's a place there to contact me. It comes to my email. On Facebook, I'm just Hanoch Young. I know, easier for me to say. But think of it this way, I've been called a lot worse, so you guys can't mispronounce my name. Hanoch, last name Young. You can always ask Marcus, how do we get hold of that guy? Okay, now, I've got this laundry list, which we're not going to do now. We could do later, because I'm getting hungry, I'm hearing stomachs growl, and it's not mine. Or maybe it is. I had a piece of cornbread this morning. I gotta tell you, the South is an amazing place. It really is. In New York City, we were clueless about the way things are here. This is probably, in my lifetime, the most exciting time to be an American. One of the things that I presented in my last two presentations was I said, y'all need to reclaim your country. America was on the highway to hell. You've got what is possibly a last gasp opportunity. And things are happening fast and furious. And it's very, very exciting. One of the things, though, I'll share that everyone can do is, if your elected officials do something that you like, send them an email. If they do something that you don't like, send them a note saying, we need to, my congregation, my family wants us to stand with Israel. Probably not going to be as on fire a priority as it was under the Biden-Harris administration, who would give us with one hand and take back with four. That was really bad. But I want to share with you the last thought before we adjourn. The single greatest thing that you can do to support Israel, there's one thing, besides prayer. Again, prayer is a given. The one thing that each and every one of you can do, yes, you're thinking of donating money, and better, by the way, better than donating money, become a fundraiser. Meaning, every single person here has friends and family who have a similar feeling and love for Israel, but they're elsewhere. Maybe they're in another church, another community, and again, relatives. You see them at a family thing, hit them up for money. My congregation is raising money for XYZ in Israel. How much can I cash in for? But the single greatest thing that you can do is make this congregation stronger. Not as individuals, but as a collective community. This is a chance, in the same way that America has a chance now to write its course. After 3 Obama administrations, America found itself really like drifting off somewhere. This is a chance. May God bless you. May He strengthen you. May He support you. And as always, may God bless America.
Thank you. We need to wake up in a lot of ways. I have a basket over here that if you would like to donate a little something for him, it's just going to be open and it's going to be sitting there right beside the DACA box. So if you'd like to give a little something, I know he would appreciate it as well. So that's all we got.
All right, and if we will all stand, we're going to turn towards Jerusalem. We will sing this all together. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These words which I command you today are to be on your heart. You are to teach them diligently to your children, and speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. Bind them as a sign on your hands, and they are to be as frontlets between your eyes. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Blessed be the name of His glorious kingdom forever and ever. Amen. Amen. And at this point in time, we are going to have our time of community prayer. If you're guests with us, we normally have gentlemen gather on this side, ladies on this side. Please feel free to do that. Share in praises, prayer